we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. We're back and we're doing your weekly lesson, and this week's topic is abstract art. So, abstract art is art that uses basic elements of art, things like shape, line, repetition, color is important, to create art that represents things but not directly shows them. It can also be expressive. It can represent emotions and feelings. So a good thing to think about, a good movie to think about that actually really, without even meaning to, maybe taught abstract art is the movie that we just watched.
Inside Out.
Inside Out.
I know a couple of you don't know Inside Out, but most of you know Inside Out.
So in Inside Out, there's these characters, and
Ping Pong, sadness and joy. And Ping Pong thought that this door said shortcut, but it says danger, keep out. And then they went in there, and then these guys closed it, and then they turned into shapes.
that's right, because they went into this section of the brain that was abstract thought. So they got flatter and more basic, into basic colors and shapes until they were each just one basic color and shape at the ends. The characters in Inside Out also express emotions. Each one of them represents a different emotion, and their colors are expressive of that emotion too. But we'll get there, right? We'll get there. Okay, but let's actually start there. Let's start with some expressive lines and colors that you can use in your abstract art. So what we're gonna do before we start with expressive lines and colors, let's explain real quick. Yep, we're gonna flip it so that I have paper to write on. We are going to take you through an exercise, a practice exercise. We're gonna take you through some practice exercises of different types of abstract art or ways to make abstract art, elements that you can use in your abstract art. That's gonna be for today. You're gonna follow along, you're gonna do what we do in your sketchbooks or on paper, line paper, printer paper, whatever you have, paper bags, anything that you have to write on, and you're gonna turn that in for your first grade for the class while we are virtual. Then today we're posting this on a Monday. On Tuesday, we're gonna post some projects that you can do, some abstract art projects where you're gonna use what you learned in this lesson to create a project, right?
Right.
Right. Okay, so let's start with some expressive lines and colors. We are going to use, you can see here really quickly, sorry, we have on the table all stuff hopefully that you can find in your house. We have pencils and pens that we just pulled out of our drawer that has writing things in them for when we need to jot down notes. We also have some Sharpies in that drawer, so maybe you have some Sharpies at home. We're gonna use crayons today. We're going to use basic markers today. We are going to use our watercolors that we made in our DIY paint lesson that we posted in our DIY supplies section. And
also we are going to use colored pencils.
Thank you, Luz. We have colored pencils.
Well, there's like...
and we have pens. I said pens, right? We have pens? Yeah. I think that's everything. So that's what we're gonna use. Oh, highlighters. If you don't have colored pencils, crayons, markers at home, highlighters, use highlighters. They can add some color to your artwork, right? Paintbrush, yeah, paintbrush is for paint. If you don't have anything with color, go check out our paint lesson because maybe that'll help you create something with color that you can add to your artwork. All right, so with that said, let's get started. Lucy and I are gonna pick up a red and blue marker to make some expressive lines with expressive color. So, Lucy, have you ever heard the expression, I am seeing red? What do you think that means, I am seeing red?
Anger.
Anger, just like in the movie Inside Out. What color was anger? He was angry. What about the expression, I am feeling blue?
Sadness.
Sadness was blue. Yeah, and it means that maybe you're sad. But sadness was also what? What did she do for
Calm.
them? She was calming. She was calming. So blue can also be a calming color. All right, so let's make, using our expressive colors, some expressive lines for anger and sadness, or calm. Okay, thank you. Okay. Lucy and I used red and blue to do some expressive lines and shapes. For our anger or our aggressive lines, we were literally aggressive with our markers. And we just made sharp, chaotic movements with our hands. With our blue, our calm or our sad lines, we tried to be more smooth and calm with our expressive. Think about how you would express or move expressively your hand to represent the emotion. Okay, so now let's do some mark making. We're gonna move on to just some mark making, and we're gonna use some of, hopefully most of us have done at least one mark making activity in our sketchbooks before we got switched to virtual learning. And so we're gonna do just some examples now in our sketchbooks. So we have some examples that we can refer to when we go to do one of our abstract art projects. Yes, Lucy. I'm so glad you asked. Let's use Sharpies and colored pencils for our mark making. So we'll use some Sharpies.
I mean those.
And highlighters. We can use some highlighters too. Okay, so we'll use Sharpies and highlighters then for our mark making. How does that sound?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So think of mark making, think of things like your lines, your long lines, your cross hatching, your hatching, your dots, your circles, your zigzags. We've used mark making in Zentangles. We've done it when we make texture with pen. I'm just trying to think of some of the lessons that were in your sketchbooks. Or just watch now while Lucy and I make some mark making examples in our book, okay? Okay. Mark making, I did some line work with different lengths of line, and I had them cross in the corner in a perpendicular way. I also used dots with my highlighter to make a circular pattern where the space between the dots grew the further out it went. Lucy, what did you do with your mark making?
Well, I used like some lines, and some of them were some that were the same height, and on this one, I made some that was with long, medium, and little, and with this, I made it's kind of like a C, but it's kind of a square C.
I like it.
Thank you, Mama.
You're welcome. All right, you ready to talk about shapes? Shapes fall into two different categories. There are geometric shapes, which are the shapes that we're usually familiar with and that we learned about in school. Lucy, what are some shapes that you know?
I know some that's square, circle, triangle, heart, and
That's a lot of really good shapes. So,
a star.
so all of those shapes, or geometric shapes, are symmetrical, meaning that if you were to fold them in half, they would be the same on both sides. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, there's also this category of shapes called organic shapes. These are asymmetrical or non-symmetrical shapes that take a more organic, flowy shape. Think about when you use your wet on wet technique and you put water down with your watercolors and then you drop color in and it just kind of moves around. It's creating organic shapes. So with that said, let's use our homemade watercolors to paint some shapes. What do you think?
Sounds nice.
Okay, here we go. The brush, and I think it's going to be hard for you to see on video, but I can see these circular patterns, these textural patterns forming that look really, really cool. And actually, Lucy and I are working in our sketchbooks with a thicker paper, but if you're working at home on printer paper, the thinner the paper is, the better you're going to get. Another idea you could do if you have thick and thin paper at home and you want to use your thick paper for the more paint stuff, but you want to do some texture rubbing on thinner paper, you can do your texture rubbing and then cut it out and collage. Use the element of collage into your abstract art, right?
Like an inside out.
Like inside, yeah, an inside out. Okay, did they collage in that movie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, you want to try now? All right, so very gently rub the crayon over the brush. Okay, so while Lucy's doing her crayon rubbing, not crab rubbing, that'd be weird. While Lucy's doing her crayon rubbing, let's talk about what you should have in your work before you turn it in. You should have some lines made with expressive line making and expressive color. You should have mark making. You should have different types of shapes, both geometric and organic. Hopefully you've experimented with different materials around your house, crayons, markers, Sharpies, pens, pencils, highlighters. You should have some rubbing textures using crayon. If you don't have crayons, try colored pencils, try pencils, just again, lightly and on its side. The last thing that I would love for you to do is go back and label everything, label all of the different elements that you tried, and we will show you an example of that at the end of this video. And that's it. Okay, check back tomorrow if you're here on Monday to see the projects that we're gonna do.
Tomorrow's not one day.
They don't know we're recording this on Saturday.